Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and ladies and gentlemen of this very august, distinguished body today. It is my privilege today to come before you to present to you this afternoon House Bill 337. A few years ago, I was appointed to be or to serve as the co-chairman of the Administrative Regulation Review Subcommittee by the leadership of this caucus. And at that point, when I was asked to chair that committee as one of the co-chairs on the House side, we have 8 members, 4 members from the House and 4 members from the Senate, and we meet monthly, 12 times a year in that committee. Before being actually appointed to that committee, I will admit my knowledge of the way administrative regulations were handled or the way they moved forward or the way they were promulgated, I very frankly was, I guess, kind of ignorant on that, the way that they moved forward, and didn't have a knowledge completely of that. But having served now on that as the co-chair of that committee for the last several years, going back even into the prior administration, the Bevan administration, and now with this current administration, it has been somewhat of a eye-opening experience as to the way administrative regulations, which are brought forward by the respective cabinet heads or the administrative bodies of the administrations. And I discovered, as the other members of that committee have discovered, that many of those regulations seem to be attempting to put those regulations forward without using the legislative process, or actually even attempting to bypass the legislative process. And so what is House Bill 337, House Bill 337? Before I answer that question, when a regulation is brought before either a standing committee or the Administrative Regulation Review Subcommittee, when the regulation is brought to us or whatever committee is involved, prior to that, there is a public comment period that is set up for the public to give their comment either for or against whatever that regulation may be. And then after that time period expires, then the regulation then would move forward, not necessarily within the next month or even the next month, but it would eventually work its way to one of those committees that would hear that regulation. And there are 3 things that happens. Either the regulation is allowed to move forward, we agree with that and let it move on forward, which very frankly, that's what the majority of the regulations do. The other choice would be either to have the cabinet heads or the administrative bodies, we would ask them to possibly defer that regulation if there would have been a lot of comments maybe against the regulation. And many times they do that. They would actually go back, look at that regulation again, even possibly have other comment periods and work out maybe the differences that were there. But then the third option, which on occasions happens, if they cannot come to a consensus to maybe change or alter that regulation, and it is still brought before either one of the standing committees or the Regulation Review Subcommittee, then with the majority of the votes of that committee, that regulation could be found deficient. So what does House Bill 337 do? It actually addresses what occurs when a regulation is found deficient by that committee. Mr. Speaker, at this time, before I proceed, I would like to call House Floor Amendment 2 at this process, please.
Clerk, please report.
House Floor Amendment 2 to House Bill 337.
Gentleman from Menifee.
what House Floor Amendment 2 does, in the original bill, which was a 20-page bill, there were approximately 5 pages, or the last 3 sections of that bill, some existing language there, actually Section 7, Section 8, and Section 9, which had no bearing really on the bill at all. It dealt with an entire different specific committee in those last 3 sections. So what House Floor Amendment 2 does is it actually deletes Section 7, Section 8, and Section 9, but it also replaces, we do come back with another Section 7 that reads as follows. And it says, whereas the Administrative Regulation Review Subcommittee is a statutory committee meeting monthly and addressing items brought before it at those meetings, and it is imperative to ensure that the mechanisms involving administrative regulations are effectual. An emergency is declared to exist, and this act will take effect upon its passage and approval by the governor or upon its otherwise becoming law. So, Mr. Speaker, at this time, I would please ask for a move for approval of House Floor Amendment 2.
Motion is for the adoption of House Floor Amendment 2. Is there any discussion? Lady from Jefferson 32, you wish to discuss the motion is for the adoption of House Floor Amendment 2. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, those in favor signify by voting aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. House Floor Amendment 2 is adopted. Gentleman from Menifee.
So, in quickly coming to a conclusion here, as I now address House Bill 337 as amended by House Floor Amendment 2, when a regulation is deemed deficient by either a standing committee or the regulation committee, what has been occurring is that our present governor has been acting as though that those regulations have no bearing and has refused to even meet and talk about those, and has allowed deficient regulations to move forward without any question, as though the legislative body here doesn't exist. But we do exist. We are the people's voice, and I feel like that when there are regulations that are brought before the committees of this body and they are found deficient, then there needs to be looking at those deficiencies as to what those committees found deficient about those regulations. So, wrapping up, if House Bill 337 were to become law, and any regulation found by either a standing committee or the Administrative Regulation Review Subcommittee is found deficient, would now be reported to the Attorney General and the Governor pursuant to KRS 13A-330, and the bill, and I want everybody to please, if you have it on your screen, I want you to go there. I want to just read a couple of lines from that, and it exactly tells what this bill does at this point. Starts on page 7, line 15. For any filed administrative regulation that has been found deficient by a legislative committee under the provisions of this chapter, the administrative body may appeal within 10 days of the finding to the Attorney General. The administrative body shall provide written notice of the appeal to the regulations compiler, and the Attorney General shall make a final determination within 20 days of the receipt of the appeal whether the findings shall be upheld, in which case the administrative regulation shall be automatically withdrawn or shall cease going through the administrative regulation process, or overruled, in which case the administrative regulation shall continue going through the administrative regulations process. The Attorney General shall transmit this determination to the Governor, the Commission, and the regulations compiler. The administrative regulation shall be automatically withdrawn and shall cease going through the administrative regulation process upon receipt by the regulations compiler of the Attorney General's determination upholding the finding or deficiency, or at the end of the 10-day appeal period, if no notice of appeal was received by the regulations compiler. So, Mr. Speaker, at this time, I would move for passage of House Bill 337